By Sarah Alzawqari, a spokesperson for the Red Cross in Iraq. Thanks so much for joining us on RT International today. A great pleasure to see you. Both the Red Cross, the UN are both expressing fears about the potential fallout from the operation to liberate Mosul, the fallout being that of potential refugees. Your comments on that, Sarah?
Thank you very much for having us. It is true, there are over 3 million people now in Iraq displaced, and we at the Red Cross, we are present on the ground. Our offices are very close to the front lines, and from what we can see, we are really concerned about the extremely big humanitarian catastrophe that is going to happen once the operation starts and people start fleeing Mosul. We are expecting hundreds of thousands of families, people that can reach up to 1 million newly displaced people in Iraq. In addition to the 3 million that there is, these people will need basic necessities from shelter, food, water, medical supplies. From what we saw, people who flee with nothing and don't have a single thing. They start all over again, and of course they live in fear of what was going inside, trying to flee the violence, and of course trying to find safer areas.
So Sarah, you're saying on top of the 3 million already displaced in Iraq, the operation to retake Mosul could prompt another 1 million refugees. Where would they go if they're not safe in Iraq?
Of course, once the families start to leave, there are different paths and different areas that they will have to go to. Now, as you said, we at the ICRC and other organizations are already on the ground and already seeking these places, whether it's camps. We are providing other things. So, for example, today, if at any point people start fleeing Mosul and the outskirts, we at the International Red Cross, we have offices in the north. Our teams are there, and we will be ready to provide emergency relief, food, hygiene kits, cutlery, stoves, blankets, anything that these people are going to need. And we can, from today, we can actually provide up to 300,000 people, and our stocks, of course, keep increasing day by day, because we are expecting that this is going to be huge.
Sarah, are there still thousands of ISIL or Daesh fighters in Mosul at the moment? I understand the ICRC is around the front line there with all sorts of medical assistance to be put forward when needed. But is Mosul still under the siege of Daesh or ISIL?
Up to now, the Prime Minister has declared that the operations have begun, but we don't have people in Mosul, but our offices are around the front lines, very close to the front lines. And as ICRC, we are concerned about the civilians, whether who are inside Mosul or the civilians who are going to flee Mosul. What we ask from all parties and all sides of the conflict is basically to spare those who are not taking part in the conflict and the civilians, and also to differentiate between building schools and civilian buildings and military ones, and try our best to get the civilians out of Mosul and the families fleeing to a safe place and get them access to medical care as well as soon as possible.
Also, Sarah, as the Iraqi government gets underway with the help of Kurdish Peshmerga fighters to liberate the town of Mosul from ISIL or ISIS, I'd like to get your comments on the fact that days ago, Saudi Arabia and the US actually created a free passage, a corridor for 9,000 ISIL fighters to leave Mosul to go and fight against Assad and his forces in Syria, ultimately meaning terrorists literally allowed to leave Iraq to go fight in Syria. Any comment from the International Red Cross on that?
We cannot comment on that, but what we can always say, that what we care about is the humanitarian situation, that we should always be there for the people, that the civilians should be put always in front of everything, and we should spare our lives, and whatever happens, they should have access to safety and access to medical care.
Now, Sarah, we're getting reports here on RT International about an explosion in Baghdad. It's unclear if there are casualties or who's responsible, but is it possible, though, the offensive in Mosul could pose a risk not only to people in the city, but ultimately all across that embattled country?
when operations and clashes and fightings happen anywhere in Iraq or anywhere in other areas, the capital is usually very much targeted, and you can find this everywhere. Yes, there was an explosion. Just we heard a little bit of it. Here in Baghdad, we still don't have the numbers of casualties and what exactly happened, but we will get that in the next few minutes or an hour.
All right, so the offensive has officially begun to liberate Mosul. Do you think, Sarah, anything can be done to actually lessen the number of people who are ultimately expected to flee that city?
As humanitarian aid organizations, we really ask all sides and all parties to give us access and let us do our jobs to help those who are vulnerable. There are so many people who are not taking part of this conflict. There are so many civilians, whether who are inside or trying to flee, and they need and they have the right to get to safer areas. They have the right to, this is the least that we can do for them, and we're asking everybody to give us access and give humanitarian organizations what we can do to help those who are most vulnerable.
All right, Sarah Alzawqari, a spokesperson for the Red Cross in Iraq. Thank you so much for joining us on RT International today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, too.